Hey there, everybody. It's Mr. Campbell here, and I am traveling right now. I'm away from home. I am in some hotel room in Denver, Colorado for a conference, and I had some spare time this afternoon, and I thought I would tell a little story about a moment that I came face to face with a piece of history. I often see these things online on social media where people are asked to talk about who is the most famous person that you've ever met, and I want to tell my story, and I think it's great because the person that I met was a historical figure, and it's just so cool because I'm obviously a history guy, so meeting this individual was really neat for me, and the person I met was Otto von Habsburg, who was the heir to the Habsburg dynasty, which of course was the royal dynasty that for centuries upon centuries ruled the Holy Roman Empire and then the Austro-Hungarian Empire after it. Otto Habsburg died in 2011. I was fortunate enough to meet him back in 2003, and I will tell the story in a moment. But first, I just wanted to give a little background on Otto von Habsburg so you know who he is. I'm not going to give a comprehensive biography of his life. You can look that up online if you want, but just a little background so you can understand. Otto von Habsburg was the son of Blessed Karl of Austria, which you see at the left, and Empress Zita. So his father was the short-lived emperor of the Austro-Hungarian Empire at the time of World War II. And born into the Habsburg imperial royalty, Otto von Habsburg was the last crown prince of the imperial family. I mean, there's still Habsburgs around today, but he was the last one to be crowned. So for the rest of his days, he was known as Prince Otto von Habsburg. So his father, Blessed Karl, not only was emperor of Austria-Hungary, but is also a blessed, and many Catholics are praying for his canonization. Here's a lovely painting I found of Otto von Habsburg at the occasion of the coronation of his parents, Blessed Karl and Zita, as emperor and empress of the Holy Roman, or not Holy Roman Empire, Austro-Hungarian Empire in 1916. Now, of course, the Austro-Hungarian Empire was done away with after World War One, and Otto was treated very poorly by the successor state of Austria, which was formed after World War One. He was in exile from his home country, not allowed to return for 48 years, because, of course, after World War One, the monarchies of Europe were overthrown and replaced with liberal democracies. And so the Austrians at the time did not take kindly to the heir of their old royal house hanging around Austria. So he was forbidden to come back from Austria unless he signed a document renouncing the claim of he and all the heirs of Blessed Karl to any of their royal privileges and prerogatives, and and being willing to live just as private citizens. And for decades, Otto refused to sign this. He refused to give up his family's traditional privileges and titles. But then gradually, after 48 years in exile, with him and none of his family being allowed to return, he finally gave in and signed the document renouncing all his privileges. Later in life, he wrote on this and said that he regretted it, wishes he had not done it. But he was finally allowed to return to Austria. And then after that, he worked in various projects promoting peace in Europe. He was an early supporter of the European Union and various things like that. And he was a devoted Catholic. The House of Habsburg, they were all, I mean, obviously his father is a blessed, so they were all very serious Catholics. So faith was something that very much informed his thinking, and he very much believed that the Christian faith was integral for the future development of Europe. So I got to meet him in 2003 when I was studying in Austria at in the town of Gaming, which you see here, at the Kartauza, which is this complex here. This was an old Carthusian monastery built during the Holy Roman Empire in the 1300s. And Otto von Habsburg would always be brought out to the out to the Kartauza to for a special night every year to talk with the students, so students would get a chance to interact with him. So they brought him out, and I think he was brought out under the auspices of the University of Steubenville, who uh, had a campus there. I was there with Ave Maria, but Steubenville had a campus there as well. So there was this big gathering there, this big dinner followed by dancing, and then we got to go into the hall and listen to Otto von Habsburg give a talk. And this is what he looked like when I met him. He was obviously, I mean, the dude was born in 1912. So when I met him in 2003, he was very much nearing the end of his life. And he was answering questions from the audience, from the students. People asked him various things about his opinion on politics and religion and current events. I remember one student asked him what he thought about smoking. And he went on this thing. He was like, well, the World Health Organization, says that smoking is bad, and that they've designated a certain day of the year as the world, the day against smoking. And then very straight faced, he just says, so I always light up a cigar on that day. And then everybody laughed. um, so I got a chance to talk to him. I was chosen to ask a question of Otto von Habsburg, and I asked him. I said, Your Highness, what is your opinion on the influence of John Paul II on the collapse of communism in Europe? And then he thought about it for a moment, and he gave a long, detailed answer. And I don't remember the details of it, but he said that he believed that John Paul II was one of the great heroes of Europe in the 20th century. And he talked about John Paul's effect on Poland and bringing down the Soviet regime in Poland, and just what a beacon of hope he was for the peoples of Eastern Europe. So, in Otto's opinion, John Paul II was one of the great figures in European history of the 20th century and responsible in a certain way for weakening communism in the East. So I thought that was really cool that I got to talk to him. I wasn't very close to him, I was standing quite a distance away, but I got to speak directly to him, and he answered my question, and it was cool. Um, so it was a very memorable night. And then afterwards, I went and drank alcohol and danced embarrassingly in the ballroom of the Kartause, um, with my fellow Ave Maria students. But he would later die in 2011, and his death was mourned by all of Europe. This is his funeral in St. Stephen's Cathedral in Vienna, which I've also been to. Marvelous Gothic cathedral from the 13th century. These are all the most important dignitaries of Europe. These are heads of state. These are members of the European Parliament. These are members of Europe's royal families. I mean, as far as royal families go, the head of the House of Habsburg, that's about as big as it gets, right? And the Habsburgs have a really beautiful burial tradition. Um, when a Habsburg ruler dies, the Grand Chamberlain of the House of Habsburg, they bring his body to this convent. I want to say it's a Carthusian convent. I don't remember the exact order, but this is the imperial crypt where the Habsburg royalty are buried. And the Chamberlain knocks on the door with his cane, and the monks say, "Who is it?" And then the Chamberlain says, "It's His Royal Highness Prince Otto von Habsburg," and then he lists all the titles, like Duke of this, Baron of this, lists all his imperial titles, and the monks respond, "We do not know him." And then they knock a second time, and they say, "Who is it?" And then he says, "It is Prince Otto, heir to the imperial throne of the House of Habsburg." And he lists all his worldly titles, and the monks say, "I don't know him." And then they knock a third time, and the monks say, "Who is it?" And then the Grand Chamberlain says, "Otto Habsburg, a mortal man and a sinner." And then the monks say, "You may enter." And then they bring the coffin in to entomb him. It's such a beautiful custom. But at any rate, when I think back about famous people I've run into, Otto von Habsburg is definitely at the top of the list. I feel privileged to have just been in the room with him and gotten a chance to talk to him. And it wasn't something unique to me. I mean, many of my fellow alumni got the same chance to see him. And I mean, there's people I know that got to go to dinner with him. He went out. There was a dinner, and like a couple students got selected to sit at the table. I was not among those. I wish I could have done that. But still, even so, it was just stands out as a great blessing and grace in my life, in a moment when I got to, interact with history in a very immediate and living way.